let's take a moment for a short, deep prayer. May peace, strength, and love fill your hearts always, and may you be surrounded by light even in your darkest days. If you haven't subscribed yet, I humbly ask you to please subscribe and join this growing family. Your support keeps these stories alive, and together we can dive into more beautiful journeys. All right, enough talk. Let's dive into today's story. Ilara's footsteps echoed softly on the polished marble floor of the hospital lobby, the gleam of the overhead chandeliers casting delicate patterns on the pristine white walls. Her grip tightened gently but firmly around the small hands of her twin daughters, Lyra and Mira, their little fingers entwined in hers as they walked with cautious curiosity. The girls were dressed in matching pastel dresses that fluttered lightly with each step, their wide eyes filled with wonder at the unfamiliar surroundings. Ilara took a steadying breath, her heart fluttering with a mixture of routine calm and an unspoken apprehension. She had been here many times before for their regular checkups. The familiar sterile scent of antiseptic, the hushed voices of nurses, the soft hum of medical machines. But today felt somehow different. It wasn't just another appointment. It was a moment that was quietly poised to unravel everything she thought she had left behind. Ahead, the gleaming double doors of the examination room swung open with a soft click, and Dr. Adrian Carter stepped in. Time seemed to still the instant his eyes fell upon the trio entering. His professional demeanor flickered, momentarily shattered by a wave of disbelief that roared through him like a sudden storm. He was used to keeping his composure, the careful mask of clinical detachment, but today the world shifted beneath his feet. Those tiny faces, the soft curves of their cheeks, the way their eyes sparkled with innocent laughter, mirrored something within him that he had buried deep, a secret kept locked away in the chambers of his heart. For a moment, the bustling hospital ceased to exist, and all that remained was the silent, unspoken recognition in his gaze. Ilara's breath caught as she met his eyes, her own face paling under the weight of 1,000 memories she had struggled to suppress. The girls tugged at her hands playfully, unaware of the storm swirling in the room. She tightened her hold, a silent plea in her eyes. "Please, don't ask, don't dig." But Adrian's mind raced, the walls around his carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. The resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just a fleeting thought or a passing resemblance. It was a truth etched into the very fabric of his being. The pounding of his heart was almost unbearable, a relentless reminder of a past he thought was gone forever. He blinked rapidly, swallowing the lump that rose in his throat, trying desperately to summon the clinical detachment that had served him well for so many years. Memories came crashing back in vivid waves. Ilara's sudden disappearance all those years ago, the frantic search, the unanswered questions that haunted his nights. And now here she was, standing before him with their daughters, the living proof of a love he thought had been lost. The girls giggled softly, their laughter like a balm and a torment all at once, innocent and pure in a room filled with unspoken truths. Adrian fought to steady himself, to maintain his role as a healer and protector, but inside the walls were tumbling down. In that silent, charged moment, fate had opened a door neither of them was prepared to cross. The world they had built apart was now entwined irrevocably by the fragile thread of those two little lives. Ilara's mind spun as she steadied herself against the edge of the examination table, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tempest raging inside. She forced a weak smile toward Adrian, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible reality settling between them. She had spent years trying to protect her daughters from the truth, from the man who was their father but had become a stranger. Yet, here he was, his presence undeniable, a tidal wave threatening to wash away the fragile peace she had fought so hard to maintain. The sterile hospital room seemed suddenly too small, the air thick with tension and unspoken questions. The girls continued to play, their innocence a stark contrast to the emotional maelstrom swirling around them. Adrian's eyes flickered with a mixture of longing, guilt, and a fierce protectiveness he had never allowed himself to feel before. His hands, steady and confident in his work, now trembled slightly as he reached out to gently brush a stray lock of hair from Lyra's forehead. The touch was light, reverent, as if afraid to shatter the fragile connection forming in the room. Ilara watched him closely, her heart aching with a blend of hope and fear. She had imagined this moment countless times, rehearsing what she might say, how she might explain the years of silence and absence. But now that it was here, words felt inadequate, heavy with the weight of the past and the uncertain future. For a long moment they stood there, father, mother, and daughters, suspended in a fragile bubble where time seemed to stretch endlessly. The hospital's usual bustle faded into the background, replaced by the quiet hum of emotions too complex for words. Adrian's mind raced with questions he dared not voice aloud, the ache of lost time mingling with a burgeoning desire to reclaim what had been torn away. Ilara's gaze was steady, though her hands trembled ever so slightly, a silent testament to the courage it took to face the man who held their past, and perhaps their future. The twins, oblivious to the charged atmosphere, giggled and tugged at Adrian's coat, their small voices breaking the silence like gentle chimes. "Daddy, will you play with us?" Lyra's eyes sparkled with innocent hope, and Mira's laughter bubbled like a bright melody. Adrian swallowed hard, his chest tightening as a tear threatened to escape. The word "daddy" hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and pain. Ilara's throat tightened, her heart pounding in tandem with the children's innocent request. In that moment, the walls of separation began to crumble, revealing a glimpse of a family long fragmented, but not yet broken. The doctor in Adrian fought to regain control, to steer the encounter back to the clinical. He cleared his throat, his voice steady despite the storm within. "Let's start with the checkup," he said softly, gesturing toward the examination table. Ilara nodded, forcing herself to comply, knowing that this was just the beginning of a journey neither of them could avoid. As the girls settled onto the table, their eyes bright and trusting, Adrian's gaze remained fixed on them, a silent vow forming in his heart to protect, to understand, and perhaps to heal the wounds of the past. Minutes stretched into hours as the checkup progressed, the usual questions and tests carried out with meticulous care. But beneath the routine, the undercurrent of unspoken emotions pulsed relentlessly. Adrian's mind kept drifting back to those little faces, to the moments lost, and to the future waiting to be written. Ilara watched him closely, sensing the shift in his demeanor, the flicker of something she had longed to see but feared. Recognition, acceptance, and perhaps forgiveness. The hospital room became a crucible where past pain met fragile hope, and the possibilities of what could be hung in the air like a delicate, shimmering thread. When the checkup finally concluded, Adrian stood and faced Ilara fully for the first time in years. His voice was low, thick with emotion he struggled to contain. "Ilara, I don't know where to begin," he confessed, the vulnerability in his tone a stark contrast to the confident doctor everyone knew. She met his gaze steadily, the years of silence between them speaking louder than words. "Neither do I," she whispered, a tear tracing a silent path down her cheek. In that shared moment of uncertainty, they both knew that everything had changed. The checkup had not just been a medical appointment, it was the beginning of a reckoning, a reopening of doors long sealed, and the fragile start of a story neither of them could have foreseen. That night, after the sterile hospital lights dimmed and the bustling corridors fell silent, Adrian sat alone in the stillness of his sleek apartment, the weight of the day pressing down on him like an unyielding storm. Sleep once a refuge from the chaos of life, eluded him entirely. His mind was a restless sea, endlessly churning with the images of two bright, laughing faces, the faces of the twins he had only just glimpsed, yet who already haunted every shadowed corner of his thoughts. The memory of Ilara's trembling hands, the subtle yet unmistakable connection in their eyes, clawed at his soul with relentless insistence. He pulled out an old, worn photo album, fingers trembling slightly as he traced the outlines of a young woman's smile. Ilara, radiant and full of life, before the years of silence and absence had carved their scars. Why had she disappeared so suddenly? Why had she taken the twins away from him, leaving a void filled with unanswered questions and silent nights? The questions burned in his heart, unyielding and raw, demanding answers that seemed just beyond his reach. Across town, Ilara sat quietly on the edge of her modest bed, the soft glow of a single lamp casting gentle shadows that danced across the walls of the small room she now called home. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, unaccompanied by the comforting sound of sobs, because she knew there was no one to hear her grief. The weight of years spent running, hiding, and protecting the daughters she loved so fiercely pressed down on her chest like an unrelenting tide. Their love had once been a flame that burned brightly, deep, passionate, and forbidden in the cruel confines of circumstance. But life had torn them apart, forcing her to flee into the shadows. The memories of stolen moments, whispered promises, and the unbearable ache of separation haunted her still, as vivid and painful as the day they had parted. The twins, her entire world, had no idea of the tempest swirling beneath her calm exterior. When they asked about the kind doctor who had examined them with such gentleness, she smiled through the heaviness in her heart, offering only the simplest of explanations. But beneath that smile lay a fragile hope, a prayer that the past would not tear her family apart. In the quiet solitude of his apartment, Adrian wrestled with a maelstrom of emotions that refused to be tamed. Anger surged fiercely, anger at the years lost, at the silence that had kept him from his daughters' lives, at the walls Ilara had built around herself and their shared history. But beneath the fury lay an even deeper current of hurt, a wound so profound it threatened to consume him whole. And yet, entwined with that pain was a desperate, aching longing, a yearning to reach out, to bridge the chasm of time and silence, to reclaim the love and family that had been stolen away. Unable to quell the storm inside, he reached out to a trusted colleague, requesting a quiet, confidential DNA test, an undeniable proof of the truth his heart already whispered but his mind struggled to accept. Days passed in a blur of waiting, every moment stretching into an eternity as hope and dread battled within him. When the results finally arrived, the confirmation hit him like a lightning bolt. Undeniable, irrefutable. The twins were his. The blood that coursed through their tiny veins was the same that flowed in his own, tying them together in a bond unbroken by time or distance. A tidal wave of conflicting emotions crashed over him, rage at the years lost and the silence imposed, hurt from the betrayal and absence, and an overwhelming longing so fierce it almost shattered his resolve. She was back. Ilara, the woman he had never stopped loving, had returned to his life, and with her the daughters he had dreamed of holding, teaching and loving. The reality of their presence filled every corner of his being, igniting a fierce determination to face the past, to confront the mistakes and the pain, and to fight for the future that now beckoned with fragile hope. Ilara's nights were no less tortured. The safety she had tried to create for her daughters felt suddenly precarious, the walls of her carefully guarded world cracking under the weight of a truth long buried. Every quiet moment was filled with memories of Adrian, the man she had loved with reckless abandon, the man whose absence had carved scars deep into her soul, The years of silence, the nights spent whispering lullabies to her daughters while yearning for a life she had never dared to dream possible. The girls, innocent and unaware of the storm swirling around them, continued to ask about the father they had never met, their small voices carrying the unspoken ache of missing pieces. Ilara's heart ached with a fierce protectiveness, knowing that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, misunderstandings, and the pain of reopening old wounds. Yet beneath the fear was a flicker of hope, a hope that perhaps, in the quiet aftermath of reckoning, love could find its way back, and the family once shattered could begin to heal. Adrian found himself haunted by every detail, the way Lyra's eyes sparkled with mischievous light, the gentle curve of Mira's smile, the subtle mannerisms that echoed the woman he had loved so deeply. He pored over memories both cherished and painful, seeking answers in the fragments of the past. Each night was a battle against the shadows of regret and the rising dawn of possibility. He realized that the man he had been, the man who had buried his heart beneath layers of stoic detachment, was no longer sufficient. The father his daughters deserved, the partner Ilara had once known, was waiting to be reborn from the ashes of silence and loss. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with unknowns and fears, but the bonds forged by blood and love were undeniable. Adrian knew, with a clarity that cut through the fog of confusion, that he could no longer run from the past. It was time to face it, head on, heart wide open. In the quiet moments between dusk and dawn, Ilara allowed herself to dream of a future where the laughter of their daughters filled a home once more, where the silence between her and Adrian was replaced by whispered promises and shared joys. The pain of the past would not be forgotten, but perhaps it could be transformed into something stronger, an unbreakable foundation for a love reborn. She steeled herself for the journey ahead, knowing that the fragile threads of family, love, and forgiveness would be tested in ways she could not yet imagine. But beneath the uncertainty was a fierce determination, one born from the depths of a mother's love and the remnants of a love that time and distance had not extinguished. The night stretched on, endless and profound, as both Adrian and Ilara lay awake in separate worlds, bound by the invisible threads of fate and the undeniable truth of their shared past. The twins, blissfully unaware of the tempest their existence had unleashed, slept peacefully between the two, their presence a silent promise of hope, of a story yet to be written. And in that quiet, heavy darkness, the first fragile steps toward reconciliation, understanding, and love began to take shape, shaped by the memories that refused to fade and the hearts that dared to hope. Adrian's footsteps echoed through the quiet, dimly lit hallway as he approached Ilara's modest door, the weight of the DNA test papers pressing heavily in his trembling hand. Every step was fueled by a tempest of emotion, a mixture of desperate hope, searing anger, and a raw, aching need for answers that had haunted him for years. His heart pounded with a fierce urgency, as if demanding that the truth be laid bare at last, no matter the cost. When the door swung open, and Ilara's startled eyes met his, 1,000 unspoken words hung thickly between them. Her breath hitched as the floodgates of long-held pain and fear began to crack. The years of silence, the distance, the unknown, all condensed into this fragile moment where past and present collided with undeniable force. Adrian's voice broke, strained and fragile, as he choked out the question that had consumed him from the moment he saw his daughters. "They're mine?" In the background, the twins played unaware, their innocent laughter ringing softly, a stark contrast to the storm that now raged in the room. Lyra twirled with Mira in the small living space, their carefree joy a bittersweet reminder of the years lost and the precious moments stolen by silence. Adrian's eyes never left the girls, seeing in them not just the reflection of Ilara, but pieces of himself, fragments of a life he had been denied, yet fiercely desired. His emotions spiraled out of control as he fought to contain the overwhelming rush of pain, hope, and disbelief. Ilara's hands trembled as she reached out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, they're yours." Ilara's knees buckled beneath her as the years of hidden sorrow erupted in a torrent of tears. She sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, the burden of secrets and survival spilling out in ragged breaths. She told him of the threats that had shadowed her family, the danger that had forced her into hiding, the impossible choices she had made to keep the twins safe. Every word was laced with the bitter sting of sacrifice and the fierce love that had driven her to protect their children at all costs. Her story was one of a mother's unyielding strength and heartbreak, a testament to the lengths she had gone to shield her family from harm. Adrian listened, his own heart breaking with every revelation, the walls he had built around his pain crumbling beneath the weight of her truth. In a sudden collapse of emotion, Adrian dropped to his knees, clutching his head as if to physically contain the overwhelming flood of anguish and regret that threatened to consume him. He was caught in a painful crossfire of emotions, heartbreak for the years lost, rage at the silence, and a fierce, burgeoning protectiveness that roared to life in the presence of his daughters. The realization struck him with brutal clarity. The woman he had once believed had abandoned him had instead been fighting to survive, to protect their children from a world too cruel to face. The depth of her sacrifice washed over him, reshaping the memories he had held onto for so long. The man who had been cold and distant was giving way to a father awakened by the undeniable truth of his daughter's existence. His gaze shifted back to the twins, now oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling around them. Lyra's laughter bubbled up as she reached for her mother's hand, while Mira clapped her tiny hands in delight at a game of make-believe. Adrian's chest tightened with the weight of lost years, the birthdays missed, the first steps unseen, the quiet bedtime stories never told by a father's voice. Each moment lost was a wound that throbbed with relentless pain, but beneath the sorrow was a powerful resolve, burning bright and fierce. He would not let another day slip away. No longer would he be the man who stood on the sidelines, watching life pass by in silence and regret. The bond that linked him to these two innocent souls had been forged by blood and love, and he would fight to reclaim every fragment of the family he had been denied. Words failed him as he reached out, his hands trembling as they hovered uncertainly before finally resting gently on Ilara's shoulders. A silent plea for forgiveness, understanding, and a chance to rebuild what had been shattered. Ilara met his gaze, her own eyes filled with tears and a cautious hope. The barriers of mistrust and fear began to crumble, replaced by the tentative threads of reconciliation woven by shared pain and the unbreakable bond of their children. The room, once heavy with unspoken anguish, now held the fragile promise of healing. Adrian's voice was barely above a whisper, laced with vulnerability and the fierce love of a father awakening to his responsibilities. "I don't care what it took for you to keep them safe. I just want to be here now, for them, for you." His words hung in the air, a vow wrapped in pain and hope. Ilara nodded slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly, as if the years of loneliness and fear might finally give way to something new, something stronger. The twins, sensing the shift in the room's energy, looked up curiously. Lyra's eyes sparkled with innocent curiosity as she reached toward Adrian, her tiny hand brushing against his. Mira followed, her smile bright and trusting. The moment was fragile and perfect, a bridge spanning years of separation. Adrian felt a swell of emotion unlike anything he had known, love that was fierce, raw, and limitless. His heart cracked open wide enough to welcome the family he had longed for, the daughters he had never stopped dreaming about. Hours slipped away unnoticed as the walls between them continued to break down. They spoke in quiet tones, words filled with apology, explanations, and dreams for the future. The past was a jagged path, but together they began to chart a new course, one that held the promise of healing and the power of love reborn. Adrian vowed silently that the pain of lost years would never again come between them. He would fight with every fiber of his being to protect, cherish, and love his daughters, and Elara the way they deserved. The morning light spilled softly into the quiet house, casting a warm glow over the sleeping figures within. Adrian awoke with a heaviness in his chest, but this time it was different, more like a fragile hope wrapped in uncertainty. He had spent the previous day in a whirlwind of revelations, pain, and hesitant truths. But today was different. Today he was given a chance he never thought possible, to be with his daughters. His heart pounded with a strange mixture of excitement and fear, and for the first time in years he felt a flicker of something he had long forgotten. Hope. He found Elara in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the twins with practiced ease. She looked up as he entered, her eyes wary but soft. For all the pain between them, there was something undeniably honest in the way they now shared this fragile space. Adrian swallowed his nerves and asked quietly, "Can I spend some time with them?" I want to be with them." Elara hesitated. She had spent so long protecting her daughters from the chaos of their past, from the unpredictable storms that had torn their family apart. Could she trust Adrian now? Could she believe he was truly ready? But looking at the genuine longing in his eyes, she nodded, a tentative smile brushing her lips. Of course. Adrian's heart lifted, and with a cautious but determined step, he moved toward the living room where the twins played. Lyra and Mira were busy building towers with their blocks, their small hands steady and precise. When they saw him, their faces lit up with innocent curiosity, as if sensing the unspoken change that was unfolding. Adrian knelt down carefully, unsure of how to bridge the years of absence that separated them. "Can I braid your hair?" he asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. Lyra giggled, nodding enthusiastically, while Mira clapped her hands in delight. They scampered over, climbing into his lap as if they'd known him forever. Adrian's fingers trembled as they brushed against their soft hair, awkwardly attempting to twist the delicate strands into simple braids. His hands weren't used to this kind of gentle touch. He was a man of precision and science, not softness and lullabies. But with every strand woven, every giggle shared, his heart melted a little more. Elara watched from the doorway, her breath catching at the sight of Adrian's transformation. The brilliant, composed doctor, who had once seemed untouchable, was now a man vulnerable and raw, completely overwhelmed by the simple joy of holding his daughters. She saw the tears threatening to spill from his eyes as he kissed their foreheads tenderly, whispering, "Daddy," in voices so sweet they filled the room with an almost sacred magic. It was a moment neither of them had imagined possible, not after years of silence and pain. Later, Adrian found himself reading bedtime stories to the girls, his voice rough at first but growing steadier as the words spilled out. The twins nestled close, their eyes wide with wonder, soaking in every tale as if it were a lifeline connecting them to this stranger who was becoming their father. The stories weren't just entertainment, they were bridges, woven from imagination and hope, spanning the distance of lost years. The sound of their laughter and quiet questions filled the room, stirring something deep inside Adrian. He realized then that fatherhood wasn't about perfection. It was about presence, about showing up and loving fiercely, even when the past threatened to drown out the future. Every smile, every touch was a small victory over the shadows that had haunted them all. When the twins finally drifted into sleep, their breathing soft and even, Adrian stayed by their door, unable to leave. The silence was thick but comforting, broken only by the faint rustle of their blankets. He stared at their Peaceful faces, memorizing every feature, the curve of Lyra's cheek, the way Mira's lashes rested against her skin. He was overwhelmed by a fierce protectiveness, a burning desire to shield them from all harm and to reclaim the time he had lost. In the quiet darkness, Adrian let down the walls he had built around his heart for so long. The cold, detached man the world knew faded away, replaced by someone new. A father desperate to make up for every missed smile, every lost milestone. The pain of the past still lingered, but it no longer ruled him. Now he had a reason to fight, a reason to hope. Ilara, standing just outside the room, watched him with tears shimmering in her eyes. She saw the vulnerability etched into his every movement, the way his body seemed to soften in the presence of their children. It was a delicate beginning, fragile as glass but filled with possibility. For the first time in years, she believed they might find a way back, not just to each other, but to the family they were meant to be. As the night deepened, Adrian whispered a silent vow to the sleeping girls. No matter what storms came, no matter the scars left by the past, he would never let them go. He would be the father they deserved. And with that promise, a new chapter began. One filled with the messy, beautiful journey of love, forgiveness, and the healing power of family. The early morning air still carried the chill of dawn as Ilara stood at the threshold of her small apartment, suitcase by her feet, watching the twins buzz with excitement, while Adrian stood a few steps away, dressed in a dark cashmere coat that made him look both imposing and heartbreakingly familiar. He didn't say much, just offered a soft nod, a gesture of invitation, not command. Ilara hesitated, her fingers tightening around the suitcase handle. 1,000 voices screamed within her, each echoing memories she had spent years burying. But then she looked down at the girls. Mira clutched her tiny backpack to her chest, while Liana hummed, swinging her little stuffed unicorn by its ear, and she saw the shimmer in their eyes, the way they looked at Adrian with an innocence she could never shield them from forever. She exhaled slowly, and with a quiet nod, she stepped forward. The ride to his estate was mostly quiet, save for the girls' occasional giggles as they looked out the tinted windows in awe at the passing trees, the glimmering lake, the hills rolling like silent guardians of the road. Adrian drove with quiet concentration, hands strong on the wheel, stealing glances at Lyra when she wasn't looking. He didn't try to force conversation. He just let the silence speak, respecting her distance like a man who had learned the hard way that love can't be commanded. When the gates to his estate swung open, revealing the stunning manor nestled in the heart of old trees and whispering gardens, Ilara's breath hitched, but she masked it behind a tight-lipped smile. The girls gasped, their hands pressed to the glass. "Is this a castle, Mommy?" Liana asked, her voice breathy. "It looks like a dream," Mira chimed in. Adrian chuckled softly from the front seat, and for a brief moment it was as if the years hadn't passed, as if they were just a family returning home. Ilara shook off the thought, grounding herself. She couldn't afford dreams. Adrian gave them a tour, and, though the manor was grand, walls adorned with rich art, fireplaces glowing, floors so polished they mirrored light, it wasn't the luxury that softened Ilara's heart. It was the small touches. The girls' room already prepared with 2 little beds, each one topped with a plush teddy bear and storybooks that looked carefully chosen. The kitchen fridge stocked with chocolate milk and fruits, the handwritten note taped to the bathroom mirror reminding the girls to brush before bed. Adrian's unmistakable scrawl. She tried not to be moved, but when she caught Liana spinning in the hallway, arms stretched, squealing that she wanted to live there forever, something cracked inside her. That evening, Ilara found herself in the cozy kitchen, standing awkwardly as Adrian, apron clumsily tied around his waist, tried to flip pancakes and ended up splattering batter on the counter. "You always hated cooking," she murmured, unable to stop the smile tugging at her lips. "Still do," he admitted, laughing. "But I'm trying. For them. And maybe a little for you." Her heart stuttered, but she masked it by wiping batter off the counter. The girls sat at the island, their mouths full, declaring Daddy's pancakes better than any diner's. Ilara rolled her eyes. "Traitors," she whispered with affection. As the night crept in, Ilara found herself standing on the patio, wrapped in a soft blanket, eyes lifted to the starlit sky. The scent of blooming jasmine carried through the air, and the distant sound of frogs croaking near the lake added a strange sense of comfort. Adrian joined her minutes later, offering her a glass of warm tea without a word. He stood beside her, not touching, just near, close enough to remind her that once his presence had been her sanctuary. "Do you remember this sky?" he asked quietly. "That night after your art exhibit, we laid on that hill for hours, naming stars like we owned them." She didn't answer, but her silence wasn't cold. It was heavy with memory. "I remember," he continued, his voice soft as twilight, "how you fell asleep on my chest. And I swore right there with 1,000 stars above us that I'd never let you go." Ilara's eyes shimmered and the stars blurred. "But you did," she whispered. "I know," he replied, pain lacing his tone, "and I've hated myself every day since." There was a long silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves. Then his fingers brushed hers, tentative, trembling. She could have pulled away, but she didn't. "I never stopped loving you," he said, turning to face her. His hand rose to her cheek, gently brushing a loose braid from her face. The gesture so tender, so familiar, it disarmed every wall she'd built. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to fall into him and forget the years of heartbreak, the lonely nights, the tears shed in silence. But fear was a stubborn ghost, clinging to her like frost. "I don't know how to trust you again," she said honestly, voice cracking. "You don't have to," he whispered. "Not all at once. Just let me try. Let me be the man you needed back then." She looked into his eyes, searching for deception, but all she saw was regret and hope. He didn't move closer. He didn't demand a kiss or an answer. He just stood there, hand in hers, as if offering her time itself. And in that fragile moment, something stirred inside her, a flicker of the girl who once loved him with every beat of her heart. That night, Ilara couldn't sleep. She watched the girls curl against Adrian's chest on the couch, all three of them fast asleep under a soft knitted blanket, and something warm spilled in her chest. The girls had wrapped their arms around him like they'd known him forever. And Adrian, he looked at peace. She hadn't seen that softness on his face in years. Slowly, she stepped closer, kneeling beside the couch, brushing a curl from Mira's cheek, then Liana's. Her fingers hovered near Adrian's hand but didn't touch. Instead, she whispered to herself, "Maybe. Just maybe." Then she stood and walked to her room, heart pounding, soul aching, not knowing what tomorrow would bring, but knowing for the first time in years that maybe love had not died. Maybe it had only waited, quiet and patient, for the moment she was ready to feel it again. The gentle rhythm of Adrian's breathing beside her, laced with the occasional murmur from one of the twins in the next room, became the unexpected lullaby that cradled Ilara into a moment of stillness she hadn't known in years, her head resting against his shoulder on the garden couch as night bled softly into dawn. The stars had long faded, but the warmth of the previous evening clung to her skin like the ghost of his touch. And though they hadn't said a word after returning from the patio, something unspoken pulsed in the air, thick, inevitable, and ready to burst like summer rain on a thirsty earth. The next morning brought no grand declarations, no pressure, just a cup of coffee. He placed gently by her side as she stood watching the girls race around. The dew-covered lawn, their shrieks of joy cracking open the last shards of cold that had caged her spirit. She glanced at him across the rim of her mug, and their eyes met, a lingering gaze that spoke more than any apology ever could. Slowly, the tension that once clawed at her bones began to dissolve, and over the next few days, what started as a cautious visit stretched into a week of rediscovered rhythms, shared breakfasts, quiet dinners, inside jokes resurrected from a time long buried. Ilara found herself laughing more, the kind that made her eyes crinkle and her stomach ache, especially when Adrian failed spectacularly at making the twins' favorite rainbow cupcakes, leaving the kitchen looking like a unicorn had exploded. His face smeared with frosting, he looked at her for rescue, but instead she doubled over in laughter, and for the first time he saw her glow, not just with beauty but with lightness, as if she was reclaiming a piece of herself she had locked away. One afternoon, while the girls built sandcastles near the small lake at the back of the estate, Adrian and Ilara sat beneath a tree, sharing stories of their lives in the years they'd been apart. She told him about the shelter, the night shifts, the way she used to whisper stories to the girls to distract them from hunger, while he listened with the reverence of a man kneeling in church. He shared his regrets, how every room in his mansion echoed louder after he realized she was gone, how he once woke up convinced he heard her voice in the hallway, only to find silence waiting to mock him. He didn't sugarcoat the pain, and she didn't flinch from his truths. That honesty, raw and unpolished, drew them closer than nostalgia ever could. It wasn't dramatic, it was steady, a soft current pulling them back toward each other. Then came the evening that changed everything. The air was thick with the perfume of blooming night jasmines, the sky painted in velvet streaks of indigo and gold, and the estate felt hushed, as if it, too, was waiting. The girls had napped after a long day of playing in the sun, their tiny bodies tangled in each other's arms, peaceful and worn. Ilara stepped into the garden for some fresh air, her long cardigan wrapped around her, hair loose and curling at the ends. Adrian was already there, standing under the lantern-lit trellis, his eyes shadowed but soft. Their eyes met across the garden path, and without words she walked toward him, slowly, as if drawn by a force she could no longer deny. When she reached him, he didn't speak. He simply reached for her hand, pulled her gently to him, and let the silence wrap around them. She could feel his heartbeat as he rested his forehead against hers, his hands on her waist, grounding and trembling all at once. "I missed you," he finally whispered. But she didn't need the words. She had seen it in the way he watched her tuck the girls into bed, in the way his fingers hesitated near hers, as if asking permission to remember. "I missed you every single day." Ilara's breath caught, her hands sliding up to his chest, clutching his shirt with trembling fingers. She had fought so hard to forget, to bury desire under survival, but now, here in the hush of the garden, with the scent of night and the warmth of his breath on her skin, she remembered everything. The first kiss under summer rain, the nights spent tangled in laughter and sheets, the promise of forever before it was shattered. When Adrian kissed her, it wasn't urgent or forceful. It was slow, aching, like a man trying to etch the memory of her lips into his soul. Ilara gasped softly, the surprise of it mingling with the thrill, and then she melted into him, her body answering every question his heart had asked for years. His hands slid up her back, threading into her hair, pulling her closer as their kiss deepened, and with it came the crash of emotion they'd both suppressed. The garden spun around them, stars blinked brighter, flowers exhaled, and time folded in on itself. When they finally broke apart, their breaths ragged, he looked at her like she was the only light he'd ever known. She touched his cheek, her thumb brushing the stubble, her eyes searching his. "I tried not to need you," she whispered, voice shaking. "But I do. I still do." His arms wrapped around her like a promise. "Then don't fight it," he murmured, pulling her in again. "Not tonight. And that night, wrapped in moonlight and the music of crickets, they found each other again, not as who they had been, but who they had become. In his bedroom, the lights dimmed to a golden hush. Elara stood before him, vulnerable yet brave, and when he reached for her, it was with reverence. Their clothes fell away like the last remnants of fear, and when their skin met, it was fire and memory, a storm and a sanctuary. They made love slowly, tenderly, with each touch rewriting the pain of the past, with each kiss unbreaking what time had tried to destroy. Tears mingled with breathless gasps, fingers grasping for anchors, hearts opening like wounds healing under warmth. Adrian kissed her scars as if they were sacred, and Elara held him as if she were drowning in a sea that finally welcomed her home. It wasn't about lust, it was about reclaiming a bond severed too soon, a reunion written not in grand gestures but in quiet redemption. And afterward, as they lay tangled in soft sheets, her head resting on his bare chest, his fingers tracing the curve of her back, the silence between them pulsed with new meaning. He looked down at her, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and saw not the woman who had left, but the woman who had survived. "You're here," he whispered, more to himself than her. "You're really here." She didn't reply, only nuzzled closer, feeling the deep, steady beat of his heart under her cheek. And for the first time in what felt like eternity, Elara closed her eyes, not in fear, not in exhaustion, but in peace. She was no longer running, no longer hiding. She was found, loved, home. And Adrian, who had waited through silence and storm, knew this wasn't just a return. This was a beginning, raw, real, and beautifully reborn. The sterile white walls of the hospital had always felt cold to Elara, but now, amid the hushed conversations and furtive glances, they felt suffocating. Each step she took down the corridor echoed louder than before, each whisper like a needle pricking at the fragile bubble of hope she had begun to nurture inside her heart. The days since her secret pregnancy had been a whirlwind, moments of warmth in Adrian's presence, hours filled with silent joy, quickly overshadowed by the creeping dread that their delicate world might crumble at the slightest touch. It had started subtly, as these things often do, a nurse exchanging a glance with a colleague when Elara walked by, the faintest flicker of recognition behind guarded eyes, murmurs barely audible but unmistakable in their intent. The hospital staff, usually professional and discreet, now seemed to orbit around her, eyes darting, voices dipping into conspiratorial tones the moment she approached. She heard fragments. The CEO's wife's, a scandal waiting to happen. What will Mr. Blackwood say? And the weight of those words pressed heavily on her chest. Elara tried to tell herself to ignore it. After all, she was no stranger to judgment. But this was different. This was Adrian's world, a carefully constructed empire of perfection and control, where reputation was paramount and weakness a liability. She could feel it in the way the hospital staff subtly recoiled when she passed, in the way the nurses no longer smiled as warmly, in the wary distance in their eyes. This world wasn't hers, and the fear that she might shatter it for Adrian clawed relentlessly at her peace of mind. Night after night, the whispers haunted her thoughts. She replayed every encounter, every glance, turning them over and over until doubt gnawed at her soul. Was she nothing more than a burden, a mistake he'd silently regret? Was this burgeoning life inside her a thread that threatened to unravel the careful tapestry Adrian had woven around himself? Elara's strength, so carefully rebuilt over the months of hiding and hoping, felt like a fragile reed in a storm. In the solitude of their shared apartment, away from the scrutinizing eyes, she found herself retreating, questioning her place beside him. The dreams she had clung to, of a family, of love that transcended past scars, suddenly seemed impossibly distant. What if she was wrong to hope? What if her presence only risked dragging him into chaos? One evening, as the dim glow of the city lights filtered through the windows, Elara sat on the edge of their bed, her hands trembling as she folded and refolded the same shirt. The silence around her was thick, broken only by the soft ticking of the clock and the faint hum of life outside. She had made a decision, one she dreaded, yet felt compelled to act upon. If staying meant becoming the source of pain or scandal in Adrian's pristine life, then she would leave. Again, just like before. Her suitcase lay open on the floor, half-packed, the fabric of their brief shared happiness tucked away alongside clothes and forgotten hopes. The thought of leaving tore at her heart, but the fear of causing him harm was stronger. She was no stranger to walking away from love. Her past was littered with goodbyes born from fear and self-doubt. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like she was giving up something precious not just for herself, but for the man who had dared to hold her heart. The sound of the door clicking open startled her, and before she could hide her actions, Adrian stepped inside. His presence filled the room, a mix of quiet authority and raw vulnerability that never failed to unnerve her. His eyes immediately found hers, dark and searching, and then they flicked down to the suitcase, to the clothes half-packed, and the tear-streaked face that looked back at him. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and charged. Then Adrian's voice broke through, not with the sharpness she feared, but with a quiet, heartbreaking intensity. "You don't run anymore." His words were a whisper, yet they resonated deep within her, shaking loose the walls she had so carefully built. He stepped closer, his hands reaching for hers, gripping them gently but firmly. There were tears in his eyes, mirroring the storm inside her, reflecting a pain that was all too familiar. "You stay. You're my family." Elara's breath hitched as the weight of those words sank in. Family. Something she had longed for, something she had once believed was beyond her reach. She sobbed, burying her face against his chest, the sound of her tears muffled against the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. In that moment she felt the strength she had been missing for years, not the strength born from independence or solitude, but from belonging, from being seen and cherished. "I just don't want to ruin you," she whispered, voice cracking with the vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. Adrian's fingers traced gentle patterns along her back as he held her close. Then, with a tenderness that made her heart ache, he kissed her forehead and whispered back, "You're the only thing that ever saved me." In those words was a promise, a beacon of hope cutting through the haze of doubt and fear. Elara felt her reservations begin to fade, replaced by a fragile but growing certainty. Maybe, just maybe, they could face whatever challenges awaited together. The following days were a delicate dance of quiet reassurance and renewed closeness. Adrian, usually reserved and composed, showed a vulnerability that surprised her. Small gestures of affection, soft smiles that reached his eyes, a patience that spoke of love tested and deepened, and Elara, drawing strength from his steadfast presence, began to envision a future where whispers and rumors held no power. Together they faced the murmurs and sideways glances with a united front, their bond forged in pain but tempered by unwavering devotion. The hospital staff gradually shifted from suspicion to reluctant acceptance as they witnessed the unwavering commitment between the two. Adrian's fierce protectiveness over Elara and their unborn child became evident, and even the coldest skeptics could not deny the genuine love that radiated from them. Elara's fears didn't vanish overnight, but they became quieter, replaced by moments of laughter and tenderness. She found solace in the small joys, the way Adrian's hand found hers in the middle of the night, the way he whispered promises of a life built not on perfection, but on authenticity and love. In the quiet moments before sleep, as the city lights flickered beyond their window, Elara allowed herself to hope. Hope that the past would no longer define her. Hope that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Hope that together she and Adrian could write a new story, one not marred by doubt and whispers, but illuminated by trust, passion, and unbreakable hope. And in that fragile promise, Elara found a new strength. One born not of running away, but of standing firm, hand in hand with the man who loved her, not in spite of her fears, but because of them. The morning sun spilled through the curtains like liquid gold, casting a warm glow across the room where Adrian sat quietly, his thoughts racing yet focused with the clarity of a man who had finally found the courage to put his heart fully on the line. He had been planning this day for weeks, orchestrating every detail in his mind with meticulous care, because this moment was more than just a simple gesture. It was the culmination of everything they had been through. Every broken promise, every silent tear, every hopeful glance had led them here, beneath the blossoming cherry trees where life seemed to renew itself in endless cycles of beauty and grace. It was here, in this sacred place, that Adrian intended to ask Elara the question that would bind their souls forever. As he carefully dressed the twins in delicate pastel dresses, their faces alight with innocent excitement, Adrian couldn't help but feel a swelling pride mixed with a fragile hopefulness. The girls were the living proof of a love that had once seemed impossible, and now they were the brightest part of his world. Their laughter echoed through the house like a promise, a reminder that life, no matter how tangled with pain and doubt, could always be made new. With the picnic basket filled to the brim with Elara's favorite delicacies, freshly baked breads, ripe strawberries glistening like jewels, fragrant cheeses, and sweet pastries, Adrian set off with the family toward the park, where the cherry blossoms were in full bloom. The breeze was gentle, carrying with it the soft scent of flowers that seemed to wrap around them like a tender embrace. It was a perfect day, one that felt almost too magical to be real, but Adrian clung to the hope that sometimes life offered second chances wrapped in the simplest of moments. Elara's eyes widened as they approached the clearing, her breath hitching as the scene unfolded before her like a dream. The cherry trees stood tall and proud, their branches bursting with pale pink blossoms that fluttered softly down around them, creating a delicate carpet of petals that cushioned the grass beneath their feet. A large blanket was spread beneath the largest tree, surrounded by cushions and a scattering of fresh flowers. The soft rustle of leaves and the distant laughter of children playing nearby blended into a symphony of peace and possibility. The twins ran ahead, their tiny feet barely making a sound as they chased one another beneath the petals, their bright dresses catching the sunlight and shining like little stars. Their pure, unfiltered joy was contagious, filling Elara's chest with warmth and a sudden rush of emotion she struggled to contain. She turned slowly to Adrian, who stood beside her, watching her with an intensity that made her heart flutter. His usual stoicism was softened today by a vulnerability that was both terrifying and beautiful. Without a word, Adrian reached into the basket and pulled out a cupcake, delicately frosted with pale pink icing, shaped like a blooming flower that mirrored the cherry blossoms above. Hidden within the soft layers of cake was a secret, a small velvet box cradling a ring that sparkled with a promise as ancient and pure as love itself. He handed the cupcake to Elara, his hands steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside him. Elara accepted it with trembling fingers, the weight of the moment settling around them like a sacred silence. As she bit into the cupcake, her heart pounded wildly, and then, suddenly, her teeth brushed against something cold and hard. Pulling back, she discovered the ring nestled in the delicate crumb, shimmering like a beacon in the fading light. Adrian's breath caught as he sank slowly to one knee, his eyes never leaving hers. "You gave me love," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You gave me life, twice." His hands shook slightly as he reached for hers. "Will you give me forever now?" The world seemed to hold its breath. Around them, the cherry blossoms continued their gentle descent, as if nature itself was blessing this union. Ilara's eyes filled with tears, blurring the edges of the scene until all she could see was the raw, unguarded love reflected in Adrian's gaze and the joyful faces of their daughters watching nearby. Her heart overflowed with a mixture of relief, hope, and an aching gratitude for this second chance at happiness. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking as she fell into his arms, laughter and tears mingling freely in the warm spring air. The twins clapped their hands and rushed to embrace them both, their innocent joy a perfect echo of the promise now sealed beneath the cherry blossoms. Adrian lifted Ilara's hand gently, sliding the ring onto her finger with reverence, as if it were the most precious thing in the world, because it was. "Forever," he murmured, "is ours." For a long moment they simply held each other, the chaotic noise of the world fading into insignificance. Around them the petals continued to fall, a soft, fragrant shower that wrapped them in a cocoon of peace and hope. The doubts and fears of the past no longer mattered. All that existed was the love they shared and the bright future stretching out before them like the endless sky. As the sun dipped lower behind the trees, casting a golden glow that seemed to set the blossoms aflame, Adrian whispered promises of devotion and protection into Ilara's hair, his fingers tracing gentle patterns along her back. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, strong, unwavering, and wholly hers. The twins, now nestled between them, giggled and told stories of butterflies and fairy wings, their voices light and full of wonder. The simple joy of their family, stitched together through hardship and healing, was a balm to every wound that had ever existed. The weight of the ring on Ilara's finger was not just metal and stone, it was a symbol of survival, resilience, and above all, unbreakable love. Adrian's mind wandered back to the moments that had led them here. The nights filled with silence, the sharp edges of fear and regret, the tentative steps toward trust. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of their story, now woven, with new colors of forgiveness and hope. He vowed silently that no matter what storms lay ahead, he would never let go again. Ilara looked up at him, her eyes shining with a clarity and strength that had been forged through years of struggle. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion, "for believing in us, for not giving up." He smiled, a rare softness touching his features. "You're my family," he said simply. "You're my home." The day stretched on as they sat beneath the cherry blossoms, talking about dreams and futures, about the twins' first steps and first words, about the life they would build together with every breath. There was laughter and tears, quiet moments and bursts of joy, all interwoven in a beautiful, imperfect harmony. As twilight painted the sky in shades of pink and purple, Adrian took Ilara's hand once more and kissed it gently, a silent vow sealed in the fading light. Around them, the world whispered of new beginnings, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. Under the watchful eyes of their daughters, amidst the falling petals and the soft rustle of leaves, Adrian and Ilara found their forever. Not in grand declarations or perfect plans, but in the quiet, unwavering promise of love that had survived every trial and blossomed anew beneath the cherry blossoms. The day of their wedding dawned soft and serene, a gentle hush settling over the world, as if nature itself was holding its breath in reverence. The candlelit garden where they would say their vows had been transformed into a sanctuary of delicate beauty, a hidden paradise embraced by ancient trees and fragrant blooms. Hundreds of candles flickered softly, casting a warm golden glow that danced on petals arranged like a cascading waterfall above the altar, creating an enchanting canopy of color and light. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and roses, mingling with the faint earthiness of freshly turned soil, grounding everything in a sacred moment suspended between past and future. Ilara stood just behind the curtain of wisteria vines, her heart thrumming in a steady rhythm that echoed the pulse of the earth beneath her feet. The weight of the white gown wrapped around her felt like a promise. Not just a garment, but a symbol of the journey that had led her here. The dress was simple yet stunning, its fabric flowing like liquid silk, catching the candlelight with every subtle movement, a whisper of elegance that mirrored her own quiet strength. It was a far cry from the fragile girl who had once fled into the night, unsure if love could ever belong to her. Now, standing here, every stitch seemed woven with hope and hard-won healing. Her fingers brushed over the soft lace that edged the neckline, and she glanced down at the hands she held, not just hers, but the hands of their daughters, tiny and warm, trembling slightly with excitement and the solemnity of the moment. The girls wore delicate flower crowns made of baby's breath and tiny pink blossoms, their eyes wide with wonder as they looked up at her mother, their shining faces a beacon of pure, unfiltered joy. Ilara's breath caught as she thought of the years they had lived through, the storms weathered, the nights filled with uncertainty, the quiet strength that had carried them forward. Today was the day when all of that pain and perseverance blossomed into something beautiful, something eternal. Adrian waited at the altar, the soft candlelight tracing the sharp lines of his jaw and the depth of his dark eyes that were locked on the path she would walk. He wore a tailored black suit that hugged his broad frame, crisp and commanding, yet softened by the tenderness that shone from within. As Ilara emerged from the shadows and took her first step forward, his breath hitched in his throat, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. The sight of her, radiant, strong, a woman reborn from the ashes of their past, was more breathtaking than any grand gesture or lavish decoration could ever be. The girls squeezed her hands tightly as they walked, their tiny steps steady and confident, their smiles contagious. Each footfall seemed to echo in the silence of the garden, a sacred rhythm marking the beginning of a new chapter. The petals above them rustled gently in the evening breeze, showering down in a delicate rain that brushed against Ilara's skin like a blessing from the heavens. The world seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with anticipation, and the unspoken promises that hung between them like fragile glass, waiting to be shattered by truth. When Ilara finally reached Adrian, their eyes met and the world faded away. Every whispered doubt, every lingering scar, every shadow of the past melted in the heat of that gaze. There was nothing left but raw, unfiltered love. His hands rose slowly, trembling with the reverence of a man who had found a miracle he thought lost forever. And he took hers gently, as if afraid to break the fragile thread that bound their hearts. The vows they spoke were not mere words, but sacred oaths etched with pain, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of two souls who had been shattered and pieced back together. Ilara's voice trembled as she confessed the depths of her love, the fear she had carried for so long, and the hope she now dared to embrace. Adrian's words were steady and true, a balm to wounds unseen, promising to cherish, protect, and honor her, not just for the good days, but for every moment, no matter how dark. Tears spilled freely, mingling with laughter that bubbled from deep within their hearts, an honest celebration of imperfection and healing. The girls clapped their small hands, their faces lit with pure happiness, unaware of the complexities that had woven their parents' lives, but feeling the joy that radiated from the union before them. The petals continued to fall, swirling around them in a delicate dance of light and shadow, a living testament to the fragile beauty of love renewed. When Adrian's lips finally met Ilara's, the world truly did fade away. The kiss was slow, tender, and reverent, a silent prayer whispered through the language of touch. He lifted her gently into his arms, cradling her as though she were the most precious thing he'd ever held, and she melted into him, her body and soul laid bare in the sanctuary of his embrace. Every heartbeat echoed with a fierce, unspoken promise. This love was no longer fragile or fleeting, but infinite, a force that would weather every storm. That night, the candlelit garden became a world unto itself, a sacred space where Adrian worshipped Elara's body and soul with a devotion that took his breath away. His touch was slow and reverent, exploring every curve and contour as if committing her to memory anew, honoring the woman who had chosen to stay despite every fear. Elara responded with a surrender born not of weakness, but of profound trust, her hands tracing the lines of his face as they moved together in a timeless dance of passion and tenderness. They spoke no words, for none were needed. Their bodies told the story of a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger, more radiant. Every kiss, every caress was a testament to survival, to the triumph of two hearts that refused to break. Adrian's worship was not hurried or frantic, but slow and deliberate. A meditation of love that sought to cherish every moment as though it were the last. He traced the marks of time on her skin, the faint scars and soft curves that told the story of their shared journey, and he vowed silently to treasure her forever. Elara's breath came in soft gasps, her skin alive with the warmth of his touch, her soul alight with a fierce joy that had long eluded her. In his arms she found not only passion, but a sanctuary where her fears could dissolve, where the wounds of the past could heal in the gentle rhythm of love. Their bodies moved in harmony, an intimate symphony of devotion that wove together every thread of pain, hope, and longing into a tapestry of pure, unbreakable connection. The night stretched endlessly before them, a timeless space filled with whispered promises and tender explorations. Adrian held her as if the world might crumble around them, but their love would remain unshaken and eternal. Elara's heart sang with a newfound certainty. This was bloomed here like wildflowers. The way Elara's smile lit up the kitchen as she prepared breakfast, the sound of their daughter's delighted giggles as they chased butterflies through the garden, and the quiet peace that settled over the house when night drew its velvet curtain across the sky. One of Adrian's first acts in this new life was to build a playhouse for the twins, a small wooden castle nestled beneath the branches of a great maple tree in the backyard. It was a labor of love, every nail hammered with the care of a man who wanted to give his daughters a childhood filled with magic and wonder. The playhouse stood proudly, painted in soft pastel colors, with curtains fluttering in the breeze and a little bell that rang whenever someone entered. It became the girls' kingdom, a place where dragons and princesses danced together under the watchful eyes of a father who had learned to cherish the small miracles of daily life. Each morning, Adrian would wake the twins with silly songs, his deep voice filled with playful warmth, as he tiptoed into their room and whispered nonsense rhymes until their sleepy eyes fluttered open and transformed into bright pools of joy. The girls would leap from their beds, their laughter spilling through the halls like sunlight, and run to the kitchen where Elara awaited them with soft kisses and warm hugs. It was a ritual that wove the family closer together, a gentle reminder that even the smallest moments held the power to build a lifetime of love. By the kitchen window, where the morning light poured in like a blessing, Adrian and Elara shared quiet kisses, brief, tender exchanges that spoke of devotion deeper than words could capture. He would brush a stray lock of hair from her face, his fingers lingering as if memorizing the contours of the woman who had healed his broken heart. In those moments, surrounded by the simple beauty of their home, the noise of the world fell away, leaving only the steady beat of two souls intertwined. Nights were even more sacred. After the girls were tucked into bed, their soft breaths rising and falling like a lullaby, Adrian held Elara close, whispering dreams and promises into her hair. His voice was low and soothing, a gentle melody that wrapped around her like a warm blanket against the chill of the night. They talked of futures filled with hope, of adventures yet to come, and of the love that had blossomed through hardship and healing. Ilara felt cherished beyond measure, protected, adored, and seen in ways she had never dared to imagine. In Adrian's arms, she found a home not just of walls and windows, but of heartbeats and whispered vows. The twins, with their wide eyes and boundless curiosity, often begged for bedtime stories about when Mommy and Daddy fell in love. Each night, Ilara would begin with the tale of two souls lost and found, a story woven from laughter and tears, from moments of fear and courage. But it was always Adrian who closed the story, his voice rich and warm as he said, "And then Daddy fell in love all over again." The girls would sigh with contentment, their faces aglow with the wonder of love's endless possibilities, before drifting into dreams filled with castles and heroes and happily ever afters. In this home, love bloomed in every corner, between father and daughters, husband and wife, soul and soul. The walls echoed with joy, the floors held the imprints of tiny feet racing through sun-drenched rooms, and the air shimmered with the unspoken promise of forever. Adrian and Ilara were no longer just two people, they were a family forged in the crucible of pain and tempered with unwavering hope. Yet, beneath this peaceful existence, a quiet tension lingered. The fragile edge of fate, whispering that their journey was far from over. The countryside, with its endless skies and rolling fields, held secrets still waiting to unfold, moments yet to test the strength of their love and the courage of their hearts. But for now, wrapped in the warmth of home and the laughter of their children, Adrian and Ilara allowed themselves to simply be, to live, to love, and to dream without fear. Every day brought new joys and small adventures, afternoons spent teaching the twins to pick wildflowers, evenings where they watched fireflies flicker like stars trapped in glass jars, and quiet mornings where Adrian and Ilara would sit hand in hand on the porch, watching the sun rise over the hills. Their love was a living thing, growing, evolving, deepening with each shared smile, each gentle touch, each whispered word. Ilara often caught herself marveling at the man beside her, the once distant, hardened CEO, transformed into a tender, devoted husband and father. Adrian's laughter had become a constant melody in their home, a sound that chased away shadows and filled every room with light. He delighted in the little things, building sandcastles with the girls, reading their favorite stories with exaggerated voices, and sneaking them extra cookies when Ilara wasn't looking. His eyes, once guarded and cold, now sparkled with warmth and fierce love, reflecting the family he had fought so hard to keep close. And Adrian saw in Ilara a strength and beauty that transcended the physical, a fierce spirit that had battled through every storm and emerged radiant. He worshipped her not only for the mother she was to their daughters, but for the woman she was in her own right, brave, compassionate, endlessly patient. Each day he sought to show her just how deeply she was cherished, whether through quiet gestures or grand declarations made beneath the open sky. Together they built routines that celebrated their love, Sunday mornings filled with pancakes and laughter, lazy afternoons spent curled up with books, and star-filled nights where they danced barefoot in the grass, their hearts beating in time with the rhythm of the earth. The twins grew surrounded by this love, their innocent questions and boundless energy weaving a vibrant tapestry of family life. But life, as they knew too well, was never without its challenges. Beneath the calm surface of their happiness, subtle signs began to emerge, whispered phone calls, unexplained visits, and shadows from the past creeping quietly into their new world. Yet, even as fate prepared its next surprise, Adrian and Ilara faced it hand in hand, fortified by the love that had carried them through every trial. In the sanctuary of their countryside home, they found not only peace but the courage to face whatever lay ahead. For in each other they had discovered a truth far greater than any hardship, that love, when nurtured with patience and faith, could bloom eternal, a radiant light guiding them through every darkness and into the promise of forever. The early morning light filtered softly through the sheer curtains as Ilara sat quietly at the kitchen table, the air around her heavy with a mixture of hope and nervous anticipation. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the small plastic device, the pregnancy test, that would change everything once more. The quiet hum of the countryside outside was a stark contrast to the pounding rhythm of her heart. She closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath to steady the storm of emotions swirling within her. Was this a miracle? A blessing she dared only dream of? Or a challenge that would stretch their family's newfound happiness even further? When the two pink lines appeared clearly, a wave of disbelief swept through her. Then an overwhelming surge of joy. She was pregnant. Ilara's first instinct was to keep the secret close, to protect this delicate hope until she could share it safely with Adrian. But secrets had a way of unraveling, especially in a home so filled with love and laughter. When the moment finally came, she found him in the garden, his hands gently tending the vibrant blooms that seemed to thrive under his care. The sun cast a golden glow around him, illuminating the tender lines of a man who had grown softer, more open, more alive since they had begun this life together. She approached quietly, holding out the test with a tentative smile. His eyes widened as he took it, his breath catching as realization dawned. Then, without hesitation, he swept her into his arms, lifting her off the ground in a whirlwind of pure, unfiltered joy. The garden seemed to hold its breath as he spun her around, his laughter ringing out like the sweetest music. His lips found her forehead in a kiss that spoke of gratitude and wonder, tears shining in his eyes as he whispered words that made her heart ache with happiness. "We're going to have another baby." The news rippled through their home like a wave of sunlight, filling every corner with anticipation and excitement. The twins, still young but wise beyond their years, shrieked with delight when Ilara told them, their small hands immediately reaching to cradle her belly, as if trying to feel the new life growing within. "Are we going to have another sister?" one asked, her eyes wide with hope. "Or maybe two," added the other, her voice a mix of curiosity and joy. Ilara laughed through tears, holding each girl close, as she promised that their family was about to grow in the most wonderful way. As the weeks passed, Ilara's belly swelled with the promise of new beginnings, and Adrian's devotion deepened in ways she had never imagined. He became her steadfast protector, attending every doctor's appointment, reading books on twin pregnancies late into the night, and whispering gentle reassurances when worries crept into her mind. The house buzzed with preparations, tiny clothes folded carefully, cribs assembled with loving hands, and a room painted in soft pastel shades that reflected the tender hope filling their hearts. When the day finally arrived, it was both chaotic and miraculous. The delivery room echoed with the cries of new life. Two beautiful baby girls, fragile and perfect, wrapped in soft blankets and held close by tearful parents who could hardly believe their good fortune. Adrian's hands trembled as he touched their tiny fingers, his voice breaking as he whispered to Ilara, "You gave me 4 daughters, Ilara. How did I get so lucky?" His words hung in the air, heavy with love and awe, a testament to the journey that had brought them here. They lay together in the quiet aftermath, the soft rhythm of the baby's breathing mingling with their own, surrounded by the gentle warmth of a family made whole. The twins, wide-eyed and full of wonder, peered curiously at their new sisters, their innocent questions and bright smiles filling the room with light. Ilara and Adrian exchanged looks filled with unspoken promises, promises to protect, to nurture, and to love this family with everything they had. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and tender moments, soft lullabies sung in the darkness, gentle rocking cradles, and whispered conversations about dreams and hopes for the future. Adrian found himself endlessly captivated by Ilara's strength and grace, watching as she balanced the demands of motherhood with the quiet resilience that had always drawn him to her. In every smile she gave, in every gentle touch, he saw the woman who had saved him, who had given his life new meaning and depth. Their home was filled with the sounds of little feet learning to explore, the soft coos and gurgles of infants discovering the world, and the constant hum of love that wrapped around them like a protective blanket. The twins quickly adjusted to their new roles as big sisters, their eyes shining with pride and affection as they helped care for their younger siblings. Together they created a symphony of family life, imperfect, beautiful, and utterly theirs. Amidst the chaos and the joy, Adrian and Ilara found moments to reconnect as lovers, as partners, as soulmates. In the quiet hours after the children slept, they would hold each other close, speaking of the future and the dreams they still carried. Their love, once fragile and tentative, had grown into a fierce, unbreakable force, a beacon that guided them through every challenge and celebrated every triumph. Ilara often marveled at how their family had blossomed, how the love that had once seemed so fragile now pulsed with vibrant life. She found strength in Adrian's unwavering support, in the laughter of their daughters, and in the quiet moments of peace they carved out together. Their journey had been marked by hardship and healing, but it was these very trials that had forged the love they now cherished, a love that was doubled, multiplied, and made infinitely richer by the gift of their children. And so, surrounded by the warmth of family, the soft glow of new beginnings, and the promise of countless tomorrows, Adrian and Ilara embraced the fullness of their love. Their story was no longer just about two people. It was about four little hearts beating in unison, about a home built on hope, and about a love that, against all odds, had bloomed brighter than ever before.